Hello everyone, my name is Braxton Miller. I go by @ill_mill on Instagram, and this is the M10 Monochrom long-term review. So I've been kind of putting this video off just a little bit because I wanted to have as much possible time with this camera that I could before giving a really good solid opinion on this camera. I usually like with my long-term videos to be able to have it for almost a year or more. So right now I'm sitting at just at the year mark. Another big reason as to why I like doing this is because there's different phases and ebbs and flows with a creative tool like this. I at first wasn't actually a super big fan of the camera. I had a little bit of buyer's remorse, to be honest. I didn't really love the way the files looked. They always, for me, especially the way I was used to editing, came out very flat. And I shoot very generally high contrast black and white. It's been that way since I shot film. My style didn't necessarily translate over to the camera right away. So I was a little frustrated with that. But again, I just took my time and didn't give up on the camera yet because I did feel that it had potential, and that, again, as I've always said with all my reviews, it just takes a moment to learn a sensor. It's like learning a new film stock. So what I did was I kept working with it, kept finding out how I wanted to shoot with it, in what situations I wanted to shoot with it in, and how I used it in those situations. I was pleasantly surprised. The more and more that I used it, the more and more I found all of its unique abilities. Now, one of the things that kept me shooting it early on was it still did have a very film-esque rendering, and I don't mean that statement to be as hyping it up as it sounds. I just mean that in the sense of the way that because this sensor measures in luminance versus color channels or things like that, it will render pretty much as close to a film stock that a digital sensor can get to. Almost in the way a P3200 Kodak renders when you're shooting at nighttime, because even the most subtle light coming from the back of the clouds is picked up. I went through a really long period this last year where I would kind of bounce back between this and the Q2. Just kind of, I never really latched on to this camera until I got a 28 on it. I was actually in the beginning, to make this point early, shooting non-6-bit, so it just doesn't have the connection to its database in the camera to be able to make some slight adjustments. So also I do think that this camera does its best work when you have a 6-bit lens connected to it. This could be just me getting used to the camera. It could be just, what my mind thinks. So take that into consideration. I'm not saying that this is 100% the case, but with my time with it, I did notice that. With the non-6-bit, you can manually enter it, but at the end of the day, your camera and lens aren't speaking to each other, so there's less of an understanding, I guess, if that makes sense. Kind of coming back to my point about it being a little filmish, it has a gorgeous glow, especially at high ISOs, around lights. There's just that little bit of ambient texture that happens around lights, just that little bit of glow that is very controlled. It looks very nice. It's not like, whoa, that's like, it looks weird. It just reminded me of the way, nighttime shooting with film would look. And so that characteristic is another one that really kept me shooting it, kept me engaged, because it's great to be able to get that look and see that look right away. If I want to take another one, I can, because I know how it looks. Obviously, that's another big drawback with film, is you don't really get to see how it was looking, what it was looking like. So with this, you get something similar to film, but you can then check, see if you liked it, see what you didn't like, reframe, re-expose, which is, a great bonus to a kit like that. I've never had a camera that it was an 100% yes that I was gonna take this one out. I've always kind of like, this one, it'd be nice to have this one today or whatever. You know, this one was just, yes, taking that one 100%, only need one lens, only need this camera, and I'm good for everything. Because I'll do just a lot of daily documenting of my life, just catching things as they come or hanging out with friends. Nice to have a small camera that can be in any lighting situation, and that also comes to another point that's fantastic, is this essentially beats the need for any fast lenses. You don't have to have them unless you want the aesthetic of 1.4, which is what's on this now, the 1.4 Lights Edition 35, that's on this that matches, which is, it just looks gorgeous on this camera. But regardless, that being said, the need for a fast lens is gone, essentially. It's funny that, you know, Leica may have shot themselves in the foot because you don't necessarily have to have anything fast anymore. You can, with that, I was shooting at nighttime in the middle of the night with just some street lamps at 12,500 ISO and a 28 2.8, and never had an issue, never have to compromise on shutter speed, shot it how I wanted to shoot it, and it functions fantastically in all settings, even though it doesn't have a fast lens. You don't need a fast lens, which is great about this camera. I think that, because then you can also size it down. You know, the 28 2.8 is about that big, so you then have small camera, small lens, and you can take it everywhere, which again is another great point. As far as its size, it can be made to be as small as I want, but it's a powerhouse. The battery life is fantastic, so it always stays ready to go. And as all of the M's do, it has the optical viewfinder and the rangefinder patch. I love being able to use the rangefinder patch to focus. It's one of my favorite pieces of this system, because you just don't get that experience anywhere else. And obviously other people have rangefinder patches, but on a digital camera these days, you're not gonna find a rangefinder patch. So it is really cool to be able to still have some of those old school values on a new school camera, and keep you engaged, keep things with a certain level of difficulty, which is always fun, to be able to have something that challenges you every day to make great things. All of the positives being said, one thing to denote, it doesn't do well with highlights. You do have to pay attention to it, and it's technically speaking a correct exposure, but you're still gonna blow those highlights out a little bit, and you're not gonna be able to pull them back down like, say, a S3, where if you blow something out, you can just easily pull that down. If you blow out a bright highlight with this camera, it is not recoverable. It will just be white for forever, and so that is something to keep in mind, and a drawback, but it's a super easy workaround because I essentially set my rangefinder meter for about 2/3 of a stop, underexposed, so then I'm kind of safe in all situations, and then always have the flexibility to pop back up a highlight, because again, it works the other way though. If you underexpose a highlight, you can easily bring it back up to white. You just can't go the other way. If it's overexposed, you cannot recover it. I don't think any camera ever will be a perfect camera, just because there's so many facets to what makes a good camera. So it really comes down to, again, choosing a camera that fits your workflow, how you make stuff, how you want to make stuff, and what you visually like. That's why, with these, I try not to get too much into specs. I like all my videos to just be about the camera, my experience with them, how the camera makes me feel versus, because, if you're looking for specs, this is the wrong place to be looking for specs. I was watching another YouTube video about a guy that, wasn't a super big fan of the Q2, and said that, for his workflow, it does not fit. He was a professional wedding photographer. That is another lane that Leica doesn't fill very well. If you're looking for super snappy autofocus, all the bells and whistles, this is not the camera company to be going for, because their mindset is not about that style of photographer. There are plenty of cameras that do make that kind of camera. That's why, again, you cannot compare the two. They're not really in the same lane. Because, you know, a lot of people are talking about the Q2s now. Spec-wise, on a sheet, they look really nice. But then you get it in hand and you don't realize that this actually doesn't autofocus as fast as my old Sony did. So now you're stuck with a fixed lens that doesn't autofocus super fast. And, you know, if you're looking for that, this is not the place to be looking for those. So I think that too, you kind of have to put a different set of rules onto these cameras as far as if you are there's plenty of professionals that still love to use these, but if you're super reliant on autofocus and you're in very inclement weather and there's so many, if you have to work around a lot of different things, these cameras aren't feature rich enough to shoot on the NFL sidelines of the Super Bowl. You can, but trying to manually focus a 200 millimeter lens on an M body would be extremely difficult. So that's where all these cameras have their lane, and there's a specific lane for each piece, which is great. And I think that that's what makes photography beautiful. There's so many different lanes as far as what you can make in photography and how you use your cameras. And just because one guy says the Q2 is trash because it doesn't keep up with his workflow doesn't mean that it's not amazing to someone else because it fits exactly their workflow. So there's no like right or wrong answers in any of these. I happen to love Leicas, but I've shot with plenty of different cameras for different purposes that have done different things. The SL2 is borderline still not fast enough to do and keep up with fast motion sports stuff, or if especially the SL2 is not great in low light. There's plenty of great low light cameras. And if that's what you need, then that is what you need. There's no shame in any brand, in any piece or whatever. So this is a long tangent just to say and explain further for people that may be looking for the monochrome and then expecting it to be feature rich. There's plenty of Fujis that do great in black and white and also have autofocus and lots of bells and whistles that make some people's workflows better. Some people get to Leica and their workflow gets worse because they're just not used to it, or it's just not the way that they create. You know what I mean? There's plenty of reasons as to why cameras just don't work for people. I personally like manually focusing because for me, autofocus kind of takes me out of it because it's easy, just press the button, whatever. So for me personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with anyone that shoots a Sony, but I don't necessarily personally want to, when I'm making things, shoot with a super awesome autofocus camera, because for me, that's not where my photos lie, where what I'm trying to make lies. But all of that is to say, I have very high praise for this camera here. Super extremely high praise. This is one of the, in my opinion, best cameras, potentially of all time. But in someone else's hands, it does not mean that they are going to absolutely love this camera, love everything about it the way I do. So that's why I try to kind of just give a full picture of a camera, how it makes me feel personally, and if your values align with how I like to shoot, then potentially you'll like it. You know what I mean? If you're looking for a Sony that shoots in black and white, this is not a Sony that shoots in black and white. But I really felt the need to kind of just expand on that more, just so then there was a full understanding and picture as far as how I view the camera, how I view this brand, how I view other brands, how I like to work, as I've talked about many times in other videos. Another thing that I did not want was for this review to be so resounding and so positive about this camera that it made someone else that may not like Leica or the workflow to get it and expect it to be just as amazing to them. This is kind of my all-time disclaimer of just because I like it does not mean that you will end up fully loving this camera the way that I do. Okay, so after all of this, of course, being said, all of my disclaimers, and I appreciate you sticking around if you will listen to that entire thing. I will get to my sample images here. One thing that I always wanted to bring to YouTube was just sample images. I feel that a lot of times, photographers, unfortunately, they get stuck where they, can only have a camera for so long, or, they have it for a week. or they're not used to it yet. You know, there's plenty of times where you just kind of see the normal house bokeh test stuff because you just don't have enough time to be able to make good images and learn the camera. You know, it's kind of just one of those where it's a talking point for a bigger account. And I wanted to just be able to have, you know, true, not super metric based reviews of these cameras, see what they can make, see how you might make things with them because you can see sample images. And we will get to the sample images now. So after we kind of reconvene here, I wanted to just quickly touch on a few, because I just remembered, a few negatives that kind of always happen with all cameras. So, you know, with this, with the digital stuff, you're stuck with this LCD screen right here. And if you sometimes I found myself on every digital camera ever, I take a shot, see the back of the screen, and unfortunately the back of the screen isn't really representative of what the image actually looks like. It'll either look better or worse. So, you know, you kind of have an idea, but you're always kind of going in blind. And if you rely too heavily on this, that's where I've ran into personal problems, just because I, you know, think that, oh yeah, this one's gonna be one of the ones or whatever. So that is a drawback, and that's a drawback that happens with all cameras like this that are digital. Another thing, you know, with film, you can, as long as it's loaded and cocked, you're ready to shoot it. Don't have to wait for anything to boot up. Here, you have to wait, and right when I said wait, you're ready to shoot. So, you know, you have about 1 to 2 seconds before you can even get the shutter to fire. Okay, you can shoot. So, you know, you have to wait a certain amount of time before you can even get a shot off, which can hurt, because if I usually just leave my camera on, but even then when it goes on, you generally will have a sleep mode, or just in general, it'll take 1 little second before you can press the shutter button. I found myself kind of going through the getting it to wake up and just pressing it a bunch of times, then hoping that it would fire on one of the ones that I was pressing. So again, another drawback of a digital camera is you're waiting for the computer to boot up, essentially. It's not a bad thing, it's just a drawback. And again, not really a negative, because a lot of people enjoy this, but personally, because I shoot a lot, you know, you're stuck with having file management systems, and I have 2 10 terabyte hard drives that I store both my videos and my photos on, and those aren't cheap. So, you know, you have this camera that has close to like 80 megabyte files. I really actually enjoyed, my favorite file size probably was on the M9. They were still robust, had a lot of data, but they still stayed in like the 20 megabyte-ish range, you know, so you really save a lot of space comparatively to the new cameras. So that is another drawback that I would say, that the files are so big, and you have to size them down to put them onto Instagram or web or to a client anyway, generally. So that is another drawback. Another thing that I wanted to add that I'm tacking on here at the end of the video is I really, really enjoy the construction of these bodies. They feel so solid. It's really unbelievable the way that they can make these cameras feel. And when you touch them, you are just essentially so connected with this device. It's always kind of odd at how well they do that. You know, I pick these up and you just almost have like this feeling of something special can happen. And it just has the attribute of lineage. This body style has been around for forever, and it's something that's tried and true. It's gonna stay. They're gonna keep it, which is just so fantastic. So it's incredible being able to feel like you're part of the timeline of a camera that so many incredible artists have used. So that would be one more piece as to why, again, this camera and the M systems as a whole are just so special to me. So as always at the end of my videos, I like to be able to just open up the forum. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm always happy to get back. At this point in time, generally it's low volume. I don't have a whole lot of traffic at this moment, so it's easy to just get back with you guys. We can have a conversation about anything that you may have questions on. I know that I do probably a bad job at covering all the topics of these cameras. I kind of just like to be able to just talk, and then if it spurs any thoughts or ideas, I'm happy to come back around and talk to people about them. The one thing that I do ask is please just stay respectful to me. That being said, helps if you give me a like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications, because the bigger this gets, the more that I'm able to create videos, have time to put these things out and edit. Other than that, thank you to everyone that has been watching and has been subscribed. That means the world to me. It's actually really cool to be able to have, you know, again, like I've said, a forum like this where we can kind of just openly talk about cameras, and not have to be spec based. It can just be about what we think about the cameras, how they make us feel. Which is awesome. I'm really excited to be able to do this kind of stuff, and have the opportunity to shoot with cameras that you know, people want to hear about. So thank you guys. I appreciate you staying to the end if you have. If you've skipped around, I also appreciate you hanging out and watching and checking out some of my stuff. And I would like one last point to say that I have a few different videos on the way, but if you guys want to comment on what you'd like to see next, that's also helpful, because you know, I can throw together a pretty quick video answering maybe a question or talking about some gear. I do have Leica sending me the M10R here soon as a loaner. I'll have it for about a week, and I'll try to do a video on that too, so then I can kind of have the ability to share some sample images of that as well. So let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in. Just, you know, pretty much any comment that you have that is constructive, leave it and I'll try to get back to it. But until next time, thanks for staying and watching. Bye guys.